I ended my last video asking for the people's voices, the film lovers, audiences outside of the industry, asking you how you would rank the Best Picture nominees. And so here are the results. But before we dive in, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to all of you who voted. I really did not expect all of these responses and so quickly. I definitely underprepared for it, so I had to close the poll several days early because you maxed out my basic account. So massive thank you for all of your votes. And one caveat that I think is important to say in case it's not clear. This vote is by no means representative of the Academy members' perspectives. It's a small experiment, just out of personal curiosity on how we perceive the films as an audience outside of the film industry. Right, so let's dig in. There were 747 submissions, and this on the screen is the percentage split of the voters' number one pick. And Everything Everywhere All at Once does it again. 59.6% of voters ranked the film as their top choice. If this were the Academy, this would be an automatic win, because films with over 50% of the votes get the Oscar. No other film was even anywhere close in this dataset. Supposedly, this kind of majority never happens in the Academy Best Picture vote. And the voting is usually a lot closer, meaning the Academy does end up having to go through the redistribution rounds. So potentially, Everything Everywhere All at Once could be considered an outlier, in this dataset at least, because it's so far ahead of all the other films, and that's not usually the norm. Here is a chart of the average rank for all of the films. I noticed that the films that were most commercially successful with high audience scores, specifically Top Gun, Avatar, and Elvis, are in the bottom half of the average ranks. Whereas the more divisive films, like The Banshees of Inisherin and Tar, which had audience scores of 75% and 74% respectively on Rotten Tomatoes, took second and third place. But I think this says more about the audience type who watches YouTube videos about the Oscars, including you watching this video right now, because that's the audience that voted and who are likely to vote in a poll like this. So this ranking doesn't include the wider perspective, perhaps people who are less interested in film and the film industry. I'll link the report in the description below for you to look at the details. But before I wrap up my Oscars videos this year, I wanted to point out a couple thoughts. In the process of creating the experiment, I had to rank the films a few times, just to trial the different voting tools out there. What I noticed about my own behavior was that every time I voted, my rankings were slightly different. The top two and last two films usually stayed the same, but the middle ones sometimes changed. It might have been dependent on my mood or what I may have experienced that day, but from the third to sixth ranks, I always seemed to change my mind. And I think that's a small but important thing to note, because when we voted on this ballot, and when Academy members vote on their ballots, lots of external factors can affect how the films are ranked in our minds. For most voters, they probably made up their minds about what they will rank as their top and bottom films, but they are less opinionated about the films in the middle ranks. But as I've mentioned in my previous videos, the middle ranking films matter a lot, because in preferential balloting, usually the most crowd-pleasing film wins, and the most crowd-pleasing films are usually in the top half of the ballot, but closer to the middle. And if these middle-ranking films aren't as fixed in voters' minds, it can add a lot of ambiguity in the voting process. It also leaves a lot of room for last-minute influences, like press conferences or informal conversations, to change how people might vote in the middle section of the ballot. Lastly, I wonder how this vote would have played out if there were other films that were shortlisted in the Best Picture category. What if Aftersun was there, or Glass Onion, or RRR? How would those films have swayed the votes? It's too late now to get into the drama of what did and didn't get shortlisted, but Best Picture is prescribed by all the decisions that were made before this point. Voters are constrained by the films that are on the ballot itself, and at this point, we can only ask ourselves, is the best film of 2022 even on the list of nominated films? I'll leave you with that thought, but thanks so much for watching. I had so much fun organizing this, and I would love to do this kind of ballot again for next year's Oscars, and perhaps some other categories and awards throughout the year. If you enjoyed participating, or missed it this year but want to participate next year, give me a thumbs up. And as always, let me know what you think in the comments, and subscribe for more spiels in the future.